Good evening. My name is Matt Barresi, and I'm the Director of Special Initiatives here at Music Institute of Chicago. I've been with Music Institute for many years now, working primarily in our outreach efforts in Chicago public schools and elsewhere. And I want to welcome you here tonight, and I want to extend a special thank you to Barbara and Peter Serrata, who wrote that marvelous reception that we just had, and who have been an absolute linchpin in one composer, one community since its inception. Could we have a round of applause for the Serratas? We talk a lot about the pursuit of excellence at Music Institute, and I think we achieve excellence quite frequently in teaching and in music. And when you think about excellence in music, a close read lets you know that excellence in music, excellence in composition, doesn't always naturally come to the fore. Just being excellent as a composer doesn't necessarily mean that you make it into the sacred canon. There are other factors at play, biases, factors that are sometimes insidious legal barriers, apartheid systems that keep certain people out of the canon. If you are in this room right now, then you enjoy pulling up a chair at the sumptuous feast that is music. And that is a feast that has been set over centuries and around the world. But there are flavors and there are dishes that have been excluded from that meal. And when you do the work that we have done to make one composer, one community work, when you go and you find the composers who are excellent, but who maybe haven't had their due, or who are excellent but are up and coming, you are putting those dishes and those ingredients at that table. When, as our teachers have done, you sift through this music, you learn new music, you decide what's going to fit for your students, you work with those students. When the parents bring the students to the lessons, cajole and bribe and blackmail them to practice so that they learn this new music. When the students put that sweat in to learn the music, they are enjoying that feast. They are putting leaves in that table. And we are pulling more chairs up to that table so that more people can enjoy this music that may have been lost. Florence Price was born in the Jim Crow South. She had to hide her identity for some years when she went to New England Conservatory. She had to flee the South because of racialized violence as part of the Great Migration. And that's when she landed in Chicago. We have some marvelous guests tonight. Dr. Traci Lombré, who's written the book Black Song, will tell you more about Florence Price's life and how the experiences of her life can be heard in her music. She struggled as a single mother in Chicago to get her works performed, and you know her as the person who was the first woman of color to have a symphony performed by a major orchestra, that being the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. But upon her passing, her legacy nearly disappeared because no one was willing to publish that music in a proper fashion. And were it not for a miraculous accident that all of her papers were found in an abandoned house in Kankakee County in 2009, water damaged with raccoons running around, we would not be here tonight to hear her music. Today, teaching artists and guests from the Music Institute went to Haven Middle School right here in Evanston, and we worked with 600 students total over the course of the day. We talked about Florence Price's life. Dr. Marie Alatalo, who is our Chicago campus director and a member of our piano faculty, who will be performing this piece tonight, performed the Fantasy Nigre No. 2 in G minor. Our guest, K-Love the poet, who was commissioned by Music Institute to write a poem about Florence Price, read poetry, and then Haven students read poetry for K-Love that they had written. When they heard Florence Price's music. This is a middle school. Middle school's rough. I think you remember middle school. Middle school is where you are too cool to respond to anything. Marie played that piano piece, and when she finished, I heard a 6th grade boy, without a hint of irony, say out loud, "Oh my God." That's how good the music was. And when K-Love performed her poem, so it's a world premiere, but I'm sorry, folks, I have to tell you that the 6th and 7th and 8th graders at Haven heard it before you tonight, but it's close to a world premiere tonight. When they heard that poem, and they saw how that poem resonated with Florence Price's struggles, and when they saw how Florence Price's life story resonated with some of their life stories, because they are Chicagoans because of the Great Migration, there was snapping, there was howling with joy at the recognition of how excellent this music was and how remarkable this woman was. This was truly a living event. And I also have to share with you that my daughter goes to that school. She's in the 7th grade, and she got in my car afterwards. I thought, oh boy, here we go. We're gonna hear the unvarnished truth of how this assembly went. And she said, "Dad, it really wasn't even boring." And then she did go on to talk about how just marvelous this music was and how remarkable this story was. So thank you to all of you for everything that all of you have done, that our teachers and students have done to make One Composer, One Community possible. Because tonight we are bringing an excellent composer back to life. It's a very special night, and it's going to be a very delicious meal. We've got students and faculty from across all our campuses. If you are inspired tonight, as I have been inspired today, and I genuinely have been inspired, I hope that you will consider helping us ensure that programs like this that can continue at Music Institute by donating on our website, which you can find. There's a QR code in your program. There's always a QR code, so that you can donate and keep this program and our other marvelous programs going. One bit of business. There's a slight change in the program, so you'll see in Act 2, Kashyap Prasad on the piano will be playing Piano Sonata in E minor. He's going to be playing it in the first half of the program between the Goblin and the Mosquito and Travel's End. All right, I've said my piece. I'll be back to introduce some of our special guests later tonight, but it's time to turn the stage over to these marvelous students. So if you would please, another round of applause for our marvelous octet and for the work of Florence Price. Hello again. As One Composer, One Community continues to inspire and uplift people within our community and beyond with the life story of Florence Price and with her music, in February, our faculty attended a talk with 3 scholars and performers who are working hard at preserving and furthering Florence Price's legacy. One was MIC Life Trustee and violin virtuoso Rachel Barton Pine. We also heard from Dr. Samantha Ege at University of Birmingham, who is an author and a piano virtuoso who performs the work of Florence Price. And from the University of Michigan, Dr. Louise Toppin, who is a voice pedagogy star and a marvelous soprano in her own right. Tonight, we have another marvelous scholar who is working in the field of Florence Price, who's going to tell us more about Florence's life story, and may help us listen to the work a little more closely. She is a long-term Chicago South Side resident and a Kansas City native. Her name is Dr. Traci Lombré, and she is from the Department of American Culture at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Traci's a cultural historian and ethnomusicologist specializing in the culture, performance, and pedagogy of Kansas City and Chicago's Black musical traditions. She holds a bachelor's degree from Smith College, a master's degree from the University of Chicago, and recently completed her PhD in American Culture at University of Michigan. Dr. Lombré is a member of Michigan's Singing Justice Collective, a group of historians, musicologists, and classical singers that investigate themes in Black American music. With this collective, she is co-author of a book under contract with the University of Michigan Press, Black Song, a Manifesto for Music and Justice, which centers Black composers, musicians, and performers in U.S. history and culture. Dr. Lombré's cultural commentary has been featured on NPR's 1A with Jen White. She has written for the award-winning 2023 Toledo Public Radio series Conversations in African American Music with Dr. Louise Toppin, and from 2021 to 2023 was an official photographer for the internationally renowned Chicago-based Association of the Advancement of Creative Musicians, Great Black Music Ensemble. Please, a big Music Institute of Chicago welcome for Dr. Traci Lombré.
What a warm welcome. Thank you very much. As he mentioned, I recently completed my PhD at the University of Michigan, and tonight, or today, is actually my graduation day. But instead, thank you. But oftentimes as scholars, we spend time in rooms where we're talking about things rather than seeing it happen in real life. And I had the opportunity, when I was extended the opportunity to come here, I thought it would make more sense to see a practical application of this music rather than be at graduation. And it means a lot, especially as a Chicagoan, to be here with you all, to have this music played, because in most cases when we're studying the life of Florence Price and other musicians, you haven't had an opportunity to listen to her, so this is actually my first time to hear the depth of her music being performed. So thank you for being with me tonight to celebrate my graduation. And another point, as Mr. Baresi just said a little earlier, this is an opportunity to bring Florence back to life. But I think most of my remarks are about more or less looking at Florence Price back home. And in thinking about her, oftentimes, she seems as a composer who's far off and in the past. And as we hear her music, it draws us closer to her. But in preparing and thinking about her more recently, I had to think about her as a Chicagoan. And that's something that when we think about Chicagoans, when we think about historic people that have found their roots here in the Chicago area to achieve greatness, Florence Price isn't someone that we necessarily think of. But tonight we're here to celebrate her musical contributions. As it says in your program, she was born in 1887, a classical composer, pianist, organist, music teacher, born in Little Rock, Arkansas. educated, as he said earlier, at New England Conservatory of Music, where she had to somewhat hide her identity. But she became active in Chicago in 1927 until her death in 1953. Another hat that I wear recently since graduating or since finishing my degree is I'm a program coordinator at the Chicago Library Foundation. And part of this role is, it's called the Renaissance Project. And what we have been granted a grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation to activate our archives. And as a part of that, we've been highlighting some of the works of Florence Price and taking them to the libraries across Chicago. And recently we've been getting standing ovations to their music because people just haven't been aware of her music. But I've learned a lot from these experiences going into the communities. One more recently, understanding that Florence, her final resting place is here in the Chicago area. But it wasn't until a couple of years ago that she actually had a headstone placed on her final resting place. And so she's been widely overlooked and overseen just as a legend in our own right of the list of Chicagoans. But again, she became active here in 1927. She passed away in 53. As I said, her final resting place is here in the Chicago area. But it's in Chicago where very talented Florence Price sprouted her wings to become noted as the first African-American woman to be recognized as a symphonic composer and the first to have a composition played by a major orchestra. And oftentimes we don't think about that role that Chicago has played. Again, as you may know, she's had over 300 works composed, 4 symphonies, 4 concertos, choral works, art songs, chamber music, and music for solo instruments. And as he stated earlier, in 2009, her works were found in an abandoned summer home, which, to our blessing, has led to a resurgence of her works around the country and the globe, as we're experiencing tonight. Florence Price's musical compositions not only reflect her experience, but they really pay tribute to Chicago's Black classical musical heritage. In Chicago, we think about the blues, we think about jazz, we think about hip hop, R&B, but rarely do we think about Black music in Chicago being classical. But Florence Price was a pillar in establishing Chicago as a Black classical musical center. Chicago's Black classical musical history is responsible for having trained many musical superstars that didn't have the privilege of performing the music that they loved so much, which was the classical music, due to segregation, Jim Crow laws, and discrimination. But some of those people include Chicagoans such as jazz and popular singer Nat King Cole, jazz great vibraphonist Lionel Hampton, the great living pianist Herbie Hancock, R&B star Chaka Khan, as well as our Jennifer Hudson and many others. But Florence Price was instrumental in cementing Chicago as a space for Black Chicago musicians to grow and learn. Chicago became a hub for some of the greatest African-American classical composers and performers who broke barriers, as we said earlier, by becoming the first to have their music performed by major symphonic orchestras or philharmonics. Major N. Clark Smith, an African-American educator, was responsible for some of the greatest musicians of all time. I consider him a father of music education. He started the music program here in Chicago at Chicago's first public African-American high school, Wendell Phillips High School. And he also started several community programs that established an environment for Price to flourish in, and his work started as early as the early 20th century in 1900 to about 1908. Florence Price and her student Margaret Bonds, along with Bonds' mother, Estella Bonds, who was an organist, along with Nora Holt, also a Black female symphonist in Chicago. These women were pioneers of the Chicago Black classical music scene. As a result of Nora Holt's efforts, she started the National Association of Negro Musicians, with its first branch, the Chicago Music Association, being founded here in 1919. The National Association of Negro Musicians is a national organization that is still in existence today, And its goal at its inception was to unify standard music education in the schools and communities of African Americans, as well as to increase the performance opportunities across all genres of Black music, but particularly classical music. Florence Price, while she was here in Chicago, the organization had been in existence for about 8 years, but it was here and it helped serve her interest. It helped her become a member of a national network of Black classical musicians who formed large communities in some of the nation's largest cities, such as Philadelphia, Boston, Detroit, Kansas City, Chicago, and Little Rock. The Chicago environment also, some of you may know, also gave Marian Anderson her start when she was visiting for a conference here early on in the 20th century. They heard her sing and they raised money for her to actually train and go to Europe. So it's actually Chicago that actually helped Marian Anderson become who she is. So of course it would help Florence Price. But all of this happened because it's a little known fact that following the end of slavery in the United States, Black leaders, politicians, educators, they all emphasized the study of classical music for young Black children. Members of the Black community believed that the study of European classical music would enhance intellectual development. So African Americans incorporated the study and performance of classical music into their school programs at the K through 12 level in their communities, as well as at the university level, particularly in historically Black colleges and universities. And it's another little known fact that even at historically Black colleges and universities, also known as HBCUs, it wasn't until the 1960s that many of them began to actually formally study forms of Black music such as jazz. But until then, it was strictly classical music in most cases, and it's just an example of how seriously classical music was regarded in African American communities and a part of intellectual development and culture. But Chicago became a haven for Black classical musicians due to its cultural infrastructure that welcomed a burgeoning Black middle class during the early 20th century with the Chicago Musical College, which is now a part of Roosevelt University. During the early 20th century, a time when African Americans weren't permitted in most parts of the country to attend colleges and universities with white students, the Chicago Musical College permitted students to study and learn classical music. Many of these musicians who I've already named became great composers, again, which included Major N. Clark Smith, who was one of the first to study there. His student from Kansas City, Nora Holt. Nora Holt became the cultural critic for the Chicago Defender, and she also became the first African American to obtain a master's degree in music as a result of having studied at Chicago Musical College. So that just, again, tells you a lot about the environment of the city itself and the opportunities that it offered. But Florence Price also attended. The school also attracted other Black classical composers who achieved notoriety, such as William Dawson. Through the National Association of Negro Musicians National Composers Competition, also known and stated as the Wanamaker Prize Contest, N. Clark Smith, William Dawson, Margaret Bonds, and Florence Price gained national recognition, where again they were among the first to be able to have their works performed by major symphonies and philharmonics. And that would not have been possible, again, without the National Association of Negro Musicians that was, again, founded here in Chicago, that actually nurtured the careers of not only these Chicagoans, but people across the country. So again, I just want to emphasize this environment in which we live and breathe. It just has such a rich heritage that supported Black classical music and study. So considering that, I prefer to think that because of Chicago, Chicago's musical heritage and the local branches of the National Association of the Negro Musicians, it actually gave us Florence Price and what we hear today. And though these musicians were classically trained, listening to European classical music as their foundation, they drew heavily on the Black folk music tradition that were fostered during slavery, such as the spirituals. The spirituals were mostly songs sang as a group that expressed longing for freedom. Now, we mostly know spirituals today in the form of the blues. The blues has the exact same musical form, but it's a little different. The blues is speaking from the voice of an individual, where the spirituals actually speak from the voice of a group. And the spirituals mostly had a double meaning that served as messages for enslaved people on how to escape to freedom. So most Black composers, especially those from Chicago, drew on the music from the Black communities. While they were studying classical music, they might have heard someone playing blues, a blues guitar, or singing the blues, or someone playing jazz, or someone singing a hymn or gospel music because of the segregated conditions that existed at the time, but particularly in this city. As a result, it gave us a rich musical tradition that at its foundation was the training in classical music. And it was important, drawing on the music from their communities. Many of their compositions typically included the melody of a spiritual that is at the center of European harmonies and classical devices, such as what we hear in Florence Price's Fantasy Negra #1. That's based on a spiritual of the hymn, Sinner, Don't Let Your Harvest Pass. We'll hear references to spirituals throughout the evening with Couldn't Hear Nobody Pray, Lord, I Want to Be a Christian, and Every Time I Feel Their Spirit. It was important for Black classical musicians such as Price to include aspects of their cultural heritage. They wanted to play the styles associated with classical music that they studied and appreciated, but more importantly, they wanted the music to have the distinctions associated with them being Black in America, and the experience of their ancestors. They created their own operas based on the Black experience, and African Americans also created their own art songs. These songs were set to poetry of Black poets, particularly of this time when Price was writing, particularly the poets of the Harlem Renaissance. And luckily in 1932, Chicago was in the midst of its own Black Renaissance, which attracted poets from Harlem such as Langston Hughes. This provided an opportunity for Florence Price and her student Margaret Bonds to meet him and to set his poems to their music. And tonight we'll hear Price's version of Hold Fast to Dreams, which is a famous poem by Langston Hughes about how to hold on to your dreams and not give up hope, but to grip those dreams like your life depends on it. So as we continue listening to the beautiful and timeless music of Florence Price, I just ask you to take a moment to appreciate the wonderful musical environment in which we live, that nurtured this music in the institutions such as the Music Institute of Chicago, one of the oldest community music schools in the city, the environment that also served to make this music possible tonight for us to play, for you to play, and for us to enjoy. So thank you very much.
So Dr. Lombré mentioned that Chicago was a hotbed of black classical music. Chicago has also been a major incubator in spoken word art. This is the city where we invented the poetry slam. And just as she mentioned that if you listen to Florence Price's work, you're going to hear the full richness of her life experiences and influences. You will hear spirituals, and you will hear gospel music in those sounds, and you will hear her classical European training as well. I'm about to introduce our special guest, Kay Love the poet, who is a spoken word artist. And when you listen to her, I've had the pleasure of listening to her all day when we went to the school, and you are also going to hear a richness of style. You're going to hear everything from classical oratory and romantic poetry to hip-hop. So I want you to appreciate the richness in her work as well, that is also, to some degree, a product of a Chicago upbringing. So we're very proud of her. Kay Love the poet is an international touring poet, speaker, and author. Shortly after her 2003 debut on the Chicago poetry scene, Kay Love quickly gained notoriety in the genre of spoken word. In 2007, she landed a feature on a Malik Youssef album produced by Kanye West. Since then, she shared stages with the likes of other notable industry artists such as The Last Poets, Jay Ivey, Talib Kweli, and Common Sense and Jasmine Sullivan, among others. With a social media presence of over 300,000 followers across social networks, national and international media publications have highlighted her career with and the Chicago Defender just featured her yesterday. So if you do a Google search when you get home, there's a video where she talks about her work. So I suggest you check that out as a supplement to tonight's performance. A lot of well-known entertainers have shared her work on their social media, including Taraji Henson, Fantasia, Black Thought, and Mary J. Blige. Kay Love is regarded as a legendary mentor to many Chicago emerging artists and is affectionately referred to as the Mother of the South Side for her service and dedication to youth through poetry. In October 2022, the humanitarian awardee was acknowledged with a Lifetime Achievement Award, as well as given the honor to speak for the 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama, via the Obama Foundation. Let's give a big Music Institute of Chicago round of applause for Kay Love the poet.
Good evening. If you have been impressed by what you have seen so far, can we give a round of applause? And can we keep that round of applause going just for the spirit and the legacy of Florence Price one more time? Awesome. It takes a lot to be an artist and to be a great artist, an artist of the magnitude that she was. And myself being a full-time international spoken word artist for over 20 years now, I know a lot about the journey to staying true to your art and deciding to do it against all odds. I remember when I started my journey in spoken word and I knew the direction that I wanted to go with it. But trying to explain that path to family members and friends who may have never seen that vision can be challenging, especially when you're an artist. You ever had something in your heart that you just couldn't articulate? You just had to show people. And so I remember writing a poem at the beginning of that, and I want to share that poem with you guys tonight. And the name of the poem is called Greatness. So let me give you a little Kay Love the poet etiquette. When listening to my poetry, typically I like when the crowd talks back to me. But you can give me some snaps. Let me see you do this. If I say something that you understand that resonates with your spirit, you can give me some snaps so that I know that you understand and hear me. Greatness. Greatness used to haunt me. Greatness used to haunt me. I used to be so much of a coward, my own power used to punk me. I always had a relationship with God, but some people's religion only seemed to keep me convicted. I
I always had respect for my peers, but some of their opinions only seemed to keep me restricted, like crank callers, and if self-doubt was some clout and money was some guilt, I would have been a well-known baller, a ball of confusion, confusing who they saw me as with who I was becoming. I could always see everything that I would be, but all they could see was everything that I wasn't. Might as well have locked me in the pen. They put a lock on my pen. They saw I had a gift and automatically tried to box me in with the label. But I told them, I'm nobody's maid or Mabel. I'm more like a model, and I'm gonna run my runway my way starting today. I'm finding and redefining my God, getting into my eye. Even when the odds are against me, can't be fenced in. I'm okay with not fitting in, because you can't be outstanding when you're too afraid to stand out. I'm cut from a different cloth. God quit making when he put my brand out. A whole nother fabric. I'm wreaking havoc on the haters, finally loving me like a super self-motivator, and I'm coming full circle. My crown chakra, royal purple. I'm a queen, securing her queendom, securing her queendom. A goddess who always had it but just got it. I finally know who God is, so it's like I'm capturing my capabilities. Like the ability to move the soul of foes who swear to God they ain't feeling me. I've been through 12 car crashes, no scratches, no scars. I die hard, ain't no killing me. Not my will, it be the most high, so I don't live like most lives. I don't think like most minds. You can't see my vision if you got closed eyes. I'm purpose driven, so me quitting, you can hang that up like a clothesline. I'm online. I'm gaining ground like I just closed on some property. I'm prospering. Don't even call me K-Love. Call me prosperous, a profiting prophetess, and my growth be my gross income. I'm coming into my own. I'm enlarging my territory. And since the land's mine, I treat the naysayers like landmines. I blow up every time I cross one. Lost ones, hoping to see me fall like Niagara. They don't know I go hard like 6 hammers. Got a little soul in my swagger, so I'm stepping to new levels like I got stilts in my stilettos. Let's go. I used to be afraid of greatness, but now I'm stalking it. There's a difference between speaking in faith and talking slick, running from it and walking in it, and well, I can't turn back. Can't turn my back. I'm taking my turn back. Once I was unequipped for this battle. Now I'm strapped like sandals, grabbing life out of handles, and I can handle it. I got a pocket full of hope and a purse full of purpose to gamble with. And I'm feeling lucky tonight. I'm loving my life, living my dream. So you could either dream with me or sit on the sidelines and watch it. Sit on the sidelines and knock it, but my faith will beat the brakes off of anybody's logic. You can't ration my passion. You can't teach this kind of tenacity. So ain't no sense in even asking me, listen, you couldn't answer my calling even if I gave you my phone. The world's best GPS couldn't put you on the path I'm on. So while you stand second guessing, I go different directions. I was given different directions. I could feel it in my midsection. I was flirting with my purpose, messed around and got pregnant with perfection. Pregnant with progression, peep the progress. Never interrupt God while birth is in the process. God planted this gift in me. So yes, I'm gonna reap the harvest. Hindrances try to hold me back like a harness, but I got heart. And they say the heart is the hardest muscle. So with a name like K-Love, you could bet I got the hardest hustle. They couldn't stop my flow even if they locked my jaw with the hardest muzzle. I break free like cars with no pads. Me, God, and my notepad, and I'm writing the vision and making it clear. I speak life over my life, and I spit death to kill fear. Only room for building here. Like the Cirrus Tower, tapping into serious power, and it's only just begun. I wake up every day and ask myself, how could I not be great when I was created by the greatest one? Never be afraid of your greatness.
Thank you so much. I hope that resonated with some of you. I was honored and pleased when commissioned to write a poem about Florence Price. It was my first time learning about her, and I really enjoyed my journey of studying and finding out things about her. I don't know how well versed you are, but hopefully if you haven't heard a lot of her story, maybe some things in my poem might resonate with you or might break it down very easily for you. And the same rules apply. If I say something that you understand, you know, you remember about Florence Price, just make sure you give me some snaps. And you're rich in snaps tonight, so you don't have to save them like to pay your rent or anything. So give them out liberally. All right.
I call it the Little Rock. A little rock, born in Little Rock in 1887. No voting or civil rights, a little Price with big value would grow to be a musical voice deserving of big value, destined to make a sound. Though black and proud, she wasn't allowed to thrive in a melanin, so for better education, she pretended to be brown, make believe herself as Mexican just to preserve her story. Attended the New England Conservatory of Music, determined to go back to Arkansas to use it, from a student to now having students. A teacher of the fine arts, fine-tuning, would soon play to the key of mother. Love turned to lullabies when her and the local lawyer locked eyes, and soon she became a wife to a man that also wanted to make hits, but unfortunately not with instruments, but instead with fists. So she took her children and went to Chicago, a single mother, now sort of like a soloist, though playing alone, the tones in her songs told tales, created wails that reached back, reached blacks whose souls were still anchored in the Lord. Classical chords created ties and allies with powerful poets. She began composing melodies for the movement. You can hear her influence playing beneath Langston Hughes' gift, songs to the darker version. By the 1930s, her excellence was emerging, a surging of her prolific, profound, over 300 works produced. Somebody say, wow. The first African-American woman to have her music played by a major orchestra. How could we forget her symphony in E minor? Who knew by 1953 we would lose her physically, but over 50 years later we would find her. In 2009, we learned that timeless can't be timed. You can't bury worth. Diamonds always push from beneath the dirt. All of her music scores were unearthed, found beneath floorboards in an abandoned house. I don't know, maybe that little rock from Little Rock was the rock that cried out while covered in her pieces, proving that genius can't be contained by gravel or grave. The rhythm will rattle until we speak their name. So tonight, we honor Florence Price. Thank you so much.
reverberations of that most glorious instrument, our One Composer, One Community 2025 celebrating the music of Florence Price comes to a close. I want to give one last thanks to our guest, Dr. Traci Lombré, to K. Love the poet, to our marvelous faculty and students from the Community Music School and from the Academy who made this night such a marvelous success, and thank you to all of you for coming. And if I could indulge any artists that are still in the house or backstage to come up on stage for one final bow and a group picture, we would appreciate that immensely. Come on up, and we'll give them a big round of applause while they come up. Thank you so much. Good night.